All right. So welcome all of you. I'm very happy to see as many people who are here as there are. It's a pretty large group tonight, so we really do appreciate you taking the time tonight to learn about the tree tender program and how you can get involved. And with further ado, we're going to do some quick introductions just so you know who's all kind of emceeing tonight. My name is Esmé Ebarniskis. I'm the volunteer coordinator at Keep Indianapolis Beautiful. And I manage the tree tender program. So you'll hear a lot of communication from me, emails, postings, newsletters, things like that. So I'm kind of your first point of contact for this program. That's not to say I'm the only person you'll get to talk to. I'm joined tonight by our community forestry staff. And guys, do you want to do a quick introduction of yourselves, name and title?
Yeah, so my name is Alejandro Espinosa. I am the manager of community forestry over here at KIB. The community forestry department is kind of the one that does all the tree planting stuff, programming, and collaborates with other departments to lead things like the tree tenders and stuff like that. The rest of my staff will introduce themselves now.
Thank you for attending this evening. We saw a lot of success with our tree tender program this past season. We're very excited to have all of them out. So we're really looking forward to expanding this group with all of you coming into the new year. I'm Aaron Stroud. I have been working at KIB in a part-time capacity for 3 years. I just started full-time just before this past season. So I'm pretty excited to continue getting all these plantings planned and implemented and trees in the ground with all of you. So again, yeah, thank you for coming this evening.
I'm Hillary. I'm also an arborist here at KIB. I'm going on about a year. So I manage the city side of our contract with planting trees. So I will be a project leader for several of the plantings this year. We're kind of finalizing all the dates for that. So really looking forward to getting to meet you guys and know you guys in person. So super, super pumped.
All right, thanks guys. We're also joined by a couple other KIB staff members. And so they're also in the audience. I'm just gonna do a couple quick housekeeping things. You guys already know. To keep yourselves muted as much as possible. Put any questions you have in the chat and send those to everyone because oftentimes people will have the same exact question, and that way we can expedite that process. If it's a really big clarification or question, we might verbally take some time and address it. But know that me and my colleagues will be handling questions in the chat as they come in. And then also, up to you about your cameras. I mean, mine's going to be on the whole night, but you guys are free to do as you please. And also remember to take breaks and do what you need to do to stay engaged. The last thing before we dig in is I sent everyone a worksheet. That is a Word document. Be super helpful if you had it on hand. Obviously, you didn't need to print it out, but that'll help you guys kind of get the really important pieces of information out from this pretty lengthy training. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to let you guys know the agenda for the night. Again, it's a pretty packed program. We're going to go through an overview of KIB. We're going to then move into hearing from some seasoned tree tenders who are here, who are going to share their experiences with the program. It's Jesse Beck and Jill Palmer, and they're going to kind of share why they love this program. We'll hear about the benefits of trees, and there are many. We'll take a break, obviously, because this is a longer training tonight. Then we'll move into more specifics about the KIB tree planting process and all the nitty-gritty details there. It's interesting stuff you never thought about before. And then after that, we'll kind of move into tree care, problems trees face, and how to hire an arborist before we review and then kind of move into what's next and what you need to do after you completed this training tonight. Okay, so I see that we have raised hands. I'm just going to say, if you have raised hands, you feel free to DM us if it's not something you want to put in the whole group chat. The raised hand thing, I forgot to mention, we're not using that tonight. Okay, so Welcome to KIB, everyone. If you've never gotten involved before, this will just be a quick overview of what we do. We're a pretty old nonprofit. We've been working in the environmental and community development fields for quite a while now. Our core programs focus on litter cleanups, pocket park installations, and of course, tree plantings. We have about 30 full-time staff members, as well as some part-time youth over the summer that come in and help us out. We have funding for various sources, and Hill actually mentioned this. The city has a contract with us. We also get private donations from individuals, as well as grants and contracts with corporations and foundations. So we kind of get a whole host of different ways of funding our work. So here's some impact numbers, and there's no pop quiz on this particular thing. So you don't need to write down all of these numbers here. It kind of was a tough and different year last year for everyone. But it's really nice to see that there was still a high impact in the number of trees planted, the number of native plants that were installed, and amount of litter collected. And that kind of hits on our three major kinds of programs. And you know, again, this is different than perhaps in past years. Some of those numbers are shockingly, you know, they might look large to you, but it's actually pretty small for KIB to have 166 projects. Typically, it's more like 800. So there are lots and lots of ways to get involved. And this year should be a lot more ramped up than last year, obviously. So it's pretty exciting to see some growth happening. Okay, so I'm going to dig into some programs, and these are other ways for you to plug in. So if you find out that you love planting trees, but you're also really into litter cleanup, which is totally awesome, there's some ways for you to get involved with that. One of our flagship programs is Adopt a Block, and that is a self-led litter abatement program where people adopt the block that they live at, that they live on, or they go to school at, maybe they work at, and on their own time, they clean up litter with resources that KIB provides. And this is a very diverse group of people from all over the city, all kinds of backgrounds or interests. Some people are really, really out there a lot. Some people only need to go out once a month. It averages out to about 4 hours a month of self-led volunteering. The Great Indie Cleanup Program is our one-day cleanups, and that's perhaps a more traditional way of doing a litter cleanup. Individuals from neighborhoods will request supplies from us. We'll provide those, and they will, you know, organize their own communities and kind of do a cleanup on their own, in their own area. We also have some KIB-led programs where we'll be the ones out there and organizing volunteers and whatnot. And typically it's over 500 tons of trash collected annually. So it's a really fantastic way to just kind of knock it out of the park all in one day. So this program, IPL Project Green Space, is our, you know, it's pocket parks and things like that. It's working with community groups who have applied to receive help from KIB in designing and implementing a space that they want to see. It's very competitive, community-led, and it's multi-year engagement. So it's a long-term commitment to saying, hey, we want a park in our neighborhood. Sometimes it'll be a church group, or it will be, you know, a neighborhood association that's leading that charge. Oftentimes we'll include a lot of native plants in there and in the design. So that's an opportunity for us to add some further greenery to the Indianapolis landscape. Our Urban Naturalist program is college-age youth that are really interested in learning more about environmental jobs, and they focus on native plants and removing invasive plants as well. They oftentimes help with the green space projects. This is probably more pertinent to you guys because you guys are here for the trees. Community Forestry is our wide-ranging, I like to plant trees. I'm out here on a Saturday morning, and it's a general program. Tree tenders support this program primarily. It's focused on building a neighborhood tree canopy and increasing the amount of healthy native trees throughout Indianapolis. And over 3,000 trees are usually planted each year, which adds up to a large number, 55,000 plus since 2007. So it's a high impact greening of the city. And then the youth tree team is actually a really wonderful way for high school age youth to get involved. And while this past year was smaller, typically it's about 80 high school students. They apply, they work with us from summer, fall, and they really focus on tree care and building like concrete job skills as well. So it's really wonderful for people exploring environmental careers, but also getting just like general, resume building skills as well. So if you know someone who's a high school student, this would be a great thing to maybe, share with them and let them know, like, we would be happy to hire them, if they're interested. Here is, now we finally gotten to the end where you're here. I manage two big programs called the Ambassadors, which are KIB committed volunteers. They've gone through their own orientation, and they do a lot of community engagement outreach, and they use specialized skills that they might have in marketing or, outreach, things like that, to help further the KIB mission. They might serve as project leaders at green space projects or provide office support at the KIB office. So they're kind of a customizable program where you're allowed to really pursue, like, I would like to help out with KIB in this way. I have this special skill. That's where you can plug in with that. Tree Tenders is the other program that I really spend a lot of time on. It's about 50 or so of you who are active each year. And you help out with the prunings, plantings, mulchings, unloadings, deliveries, everything related to trees. And that's been around since 2015. So we're now entering the 7th year. No, that's wrong. 6th year. I can do math. 6th year. So it's a pretty long-standing program at KIB. And briefly, I just want to touch on a supportive program, the Department of Education, that's led by our Director of Education, Heather Maurer. She's not here tonight, but I'll just share what she does. She provides wraparound support to all teams and programs at KIB and helps further the educational aspects of our programming. She provides opportunities also for schools and businesses to get engaged. She will sometimes do guest speaking at a classroom if a teacher wants more information about the environment or wants to have her lead like a nature activity, a nature focused activity. She'll also meet with businesses and do lunch and learns if corporations are interested in providing that kind of enrichment opportunity for their employees. She has many different resources developed for the public, for both kids and adults, that are accessible on the education webpage at the KIB website. So if you're interested in that, or you want to book her for your classroom, if you're a teacher, please feel free to reach out or look on our website. She's a really wonderful at leading kids in activities. Okay, so now we're going to turn it over to Jesse and Jill, who are going to talk a little bit more about why they are tree tenders and their experiences with the program. Jesse and Jill, it's all you.
Well, hi all, I'm Jesse Beck. Been a tree tender since the first class there in 2015. Along with Jill, I think there's about 20 other of us, but it's I think I first started volunteering at KIB in 2011 when they did a tree planting in my old neighborhood, Little Flower, and over a few years' time, we planted over 1,000 trees just in my neighborhood. So it's awesome to see the impact KIB has in the area. But as far as KIB, I've stuck around. The tree tenders, and for now, I guess year 6. It seems crazy, but also, I work as a grounds manager for a university here in town. KIB helps a lot with that too. So we do yearly tree plantings with our students, kind of get them involved, kind of learn more about urban forestry and the importance of trees. And yeah, it's just always a neat experience. I mean, I've done a lot of volunteer for other organizations, and KIB is so neat because they make you feel valued as a volunteer. Whether that's like as a tree tender, you'll learn like the more events you show up to, the more free stuff you get. It's like I've gotten t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, all the different arborist tools you could possibly think of just from showing up and, you know, having a good time planting trees. It's neat just kind of going around the city now after doing this. Will be 6 years, and like every time you see a tree with a little white trunk guard on it, it's like, oh yeah, I helped plant that. It's like, you know, it's just kind of awesome seeing the impact our work has on the city just with something little as a tree guard. You see, you know, whether it be a city park or trail, neighborhood. I was out biking the other day and someplace I haven't been for a while, like, oh yeah, I know this area because, well, Jill and I did the tree planting over there. Yeah, it's just kind of neat the places and things you see. And then just the people in general. I mean, the forestry staff over the years, you know, it's became a good group of friends. You know, we sometimes go grab a beer or have lunch after planting. You know, or there's things like Jill and I have done prunings in her neighborhood, like separately. You know, KIB's helped support us with getting rid of the brush and different things. So I guess the neatest thing about being a long-term volunteer with them is like, if you have a dream of something you want to do, whether it's a little pocket park for your neighborhood or tree planting or yeah, a litter cleanup, you know, KIB staff is always there to kind of help support whatever dream it is you may have. So yeah, that's kind of what's kept me coming back for all these years, and yeah, lots of hours, lots of hours. But that's all I got, and yeah, over to Jill.
Thanks, Jesse. As he said, yeah, we've been tree tenders since the very beginning. So when whoever dreamed up this program, I was looking for an opportunity to do some more volunteering. I had volunteered with KIB a number of times over many years, and was pleasantly surprised at how many people were cheerful at these early morning, cleanups, plantings, whatever. It seems like even, especially when the weather is bad, for some reason, we always seem to have a good time. So when this program was developed, somebody contacted me and said, hey, might you be interested in this? I said, sure, why not? And sure enough, those of us going into our 6th year, we pretty much all know each other pretty well. We've become friends on top of the planting opportunities. It really is, for some reason, we have a good time, even though it's hard work and sometimes it's bad weather. And that's why I keep showing up, is it gets me out of bed, and I get to do something productive with my Saturday mornings usually. For me, anyway, I know Jesse's work is related to trees and plants and grounds, but for me, I sit at a computer all day, so it's a great break for me. I've always enjoyed kind of yard work and gardening a little bit. I really enjoy getting away from my desk and going outside and getting dirty and being a completely different person than I am on a normal work day. In fact, normally when we do this training event, I show up in my work clothes and nobody recognizes me at KIB because they're used to seeing Saturday Jill. So today I dressed as Saturday Jill so you could all find me in the future. So that pretty much sums it up. We made friends, have a good time, and for some reason I always forget we are also doing good things for the community. That's almost a side note. But always have great staff, great fun, great volunteers. It's always for some reason a fun time to go outside and be cold and wet and work together. So I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Thank you, Jill and Jesse, so much for being here and sharing that. Yes, so they're actually been with this program since the start. So if you have a question about what is it like once I've been in this program for 4 years, like, is it still fun? You can ask them and they'll have some good answers for you. Thanks guys for sharing all that. We're going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of the program and what exactly it looks like. You know, at this point, you probably are thinking like, what exactly do I do in this program? What makes it different, special? Give me the details. And basically you serve as advocates and general wraparound support and helpers. You have a lot of advanced knowledge once you've gone through this program, especially around tree care and why we're planting these trees, where we're planting them. So in that way, you're equipped to help other volunteers who are not tree tenders learn how to plant a tree, care for them, why we're out where we are, what the neighborhood's needs are, and as well as answer questions about, you just pruned that, why did you do that? So you also help expand our educational opportunities. And also, I note that Jesse mentioned the rewards and free stuff he's gotten. We have a pretty advanced system of perks. So the more you volunteer, the more free stuff I give you. I don't consider that a bribe, but I mean, you could, because once you are done with the training, you get your t-shirt, you get a book about trees, you get your certification with your name on it. It looks very fancy, like you graduated from a college. It genuinely looks like my diploma. After doing 3 projects that same year, you get a soil knife. It bumps up to hand pruners, sweatshirts, holsters, saws. The list keeps going. So the more you volunteer, the more stuff you get. And I do allow people who are like, you know, I really just need another soil knife. You can always work with me and switch out which perk you're getting. It's not like it's set in stone. Again, this is not technically a bribe, but it kind of is. And there's also social gatherings as COVID allows, and additional workshops and things like that that will help you learn more specialized things or just have fun together. It's been a little bit tough with COVID to plan some of those, you know, in-person gatherings, but we're working on some ideas. So that's another way that you can get to know each other and build relationships. Okay, so I'm now going to actually turn it over. I'm sure you're sick of hearing my voice at this point, and we're going to hear from some people on the CF side of things.
All right, hello again, everybody. To kind of like kick stuff off in terms of like what we're going to be doing and talking about for the tree aspect of everything tonight, I'm going to just kind of start talking about some of the benefits of planting trees in the urban environment. I do want to preface this that this is numbered 1 through 10, but is in no specific order. Depending on what the particular project we're working on is, sometimes the benefits of that tree are going to, like, one's going to outweigh another. So don't read anything into the ranking as we start to go through this. Thank you, Esmé. So as we're all aware, trees are important, is we've learned from such a young age for oxygen production. You know, we breathe it in and we emit the CO2, and the trees like that to continue to absorb that to produce more oxygen for us. Here in the city, I'm not going to say that our plantings are providing kind of like a copious amount of oxygen. They certainly help, and it's one of the biggest benefits that we could talk about for our trees in our communities. But yeah, so there's another example in here also. Okay, there we go. I thought it was on that last slide. So here is an example. We have a mature ash tree. A mature ash tree might be kind of a bad example now after the ash borer has gone through, but it's just kind of highlight a type of tree species that typically thrives in an urban environment, and historically that was an ash tree. You could kind of think of the same as like an elm, a sycamore, tulip, other trees that grow fast and get very large and do very well in these urban settings. It's just to kind of highlight that as they reach maturity, they're starting to produce as much oxygen almost as a human's going to need throughout the year. Now, obviously, Marion County got upwards of pushing 1 million people in the county. So not necessarily you're only getting that benefit from trees only, you know, other plants and things come into effect there. But so it kind of like highlights the importance of why we do these right-of-way plantings in neighborhoods specifically. So we're going into areas that do have canopy cover but might need more. So we plant these trees there, and then we try to focus a lot on areas that have no canopy cover at all. So once you start to get hit neighborhoods like this, and your trees are starting to reach maturity, they're going to start, people in the neighborhood are going to start seeing the benefits of things like oxygen production, and if we go on to the next slide, noise reduction. So this project right here is actually just off of I-70, and I've been a part of 2 plantings there. These are, I believe this is Brayburn Apartments over on the east side of Indianapolis. And I actually used to have a friend that lived in these apartments, and you hear nothing but the interstate. You're doing great, Esmé, I promise. So depending on the tree species and how large they are, you know, it can reduce noise by up to half. And when you're living next to an interstate, busy intersections think about places like Broad Ripple, where you're really close to like Kessler and Benford and that sort of area, you start to like line these trees in these public right-of-ways with large mature trees. You're really going to start cutting out noise, which I know neighbors everywhere appreciate. My streets, I live in Irvington, the south side of Irvington, and my street is shockingly busy for like where it's located. That said, we do have some trees from KIB that are 2 years old on my street. So just kind of an example of an attempt at noise reduction for neighbors in particular neighborhoods. You're good, Esmé. Okay, wildlife habitat.
Aaron,
This for me is, I think, one of the more crucial aspects of our plantings, and it doesn't even have to do with just tree plantings and that we do here at KIB. This also touches our green space projects and invasive removals as well. And so we like to tout that about 50% of our trees that we plant at KIB, we dub giving trees. That means they will serve as hosts to a wide array of wildlife, and that can include birds, rodents like squirrels, and insects, who all use those trees as some form of habitat or food. So we really like to focus our numbers and our species planting on what not only they give back to like the community as a whole, but I mean, to a degree, our wildlife, they are a part of our community. They are a part of our existence here in the city. So we want to do everything we can to make sure that our projects are hitting as many of these benefits as possible. And wildlife habitat is one that we've really tried to focus on a lot in CF here the last couple of years. All right, UV radiation, this kind of goes, ties in a little bit to another aspect we'll get into with the cooling aspect that trees provide the city as well. But leaves on trees obviously can block out lots of sunlight. Those are harmful like rays that aren't going to get down to you as you're walking down the street, or you're taking your kids out to the park to play or go for a hike and things like that. So I mean, obviously, if you're not standing in sunlight, you're getting a lot of UV radiation cut off from you. Okay, and water quality improvement is probably what I'm probably most hype about this one, because I work on the CEG side of things with Alejandro, and that contract is written specifically for planting in particular basins that see issues with stormwater runoff and overflow. This initiative that we have with Citizens Energy Group kind of goes hand in hand with their Dig Indy Tunnel project, if any of you are aware of that. Indianapolis is on a combined sewer system, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So what that means is stormwater and your sewage are all going into the same drains. And if it hits a certain point, it's going to overflow. In Indianapolis, that means a 1/4 inch of rain. So it doesn't take much at all for those to overflow. So in conjunction with this Dig Indy project that Citizens has going on, we are working with them to plant 10,000 trees in these high problem areas to keep more stormwater out of those drains to be intercepted by the trees that we plant. All right, so here is what a combined sewer system looks at. This looks like school for me all over again. So this brown liquid coming down out of your house, I'm sure you can imagine exactly what it is. So you kind of see how that sewage and wastewater starts to like come down this piping here, and there's your storm drain up in your driveway. So it doesn't have to be in your driveway, you know, walking down the street, you'll see the little like sewers where all the water flows in. Guess what else is in there? Your waste and sewage. This is what happens to that drain in the event of what some might say a heavy rainfall, but in Indianapolis, it's a 1/4 inch, and that's why, sorry, in Indianapolis, that means a 1/4 inch, and that's why the Dig Indy project is so important, and that's why it's even more important for us to implement things like tree plantings to keep more of that out. So you get a 1/4 inch of rain coming down between everyone's sewage in your neighborhood and throughout the city, combined with that little bit of rain. There's nowhere for this to go down to treatment facilities. So we have these spill-offs over here in the waterway. If you're ever driving along White River, or like I said, I live in Irvington, so the creek that runs through there, there's overflows over there by Ellenberger Park. In high, or again, low rainfall, you will see sewage coming out and into your local waterways. You know, as a kid, you know, I was very much a creek stomper with friends, you know, like walking down the creek, and now that I'm older, I'm kind of like, it's pretty gross. Yes, I'm pretty excited that I get to work in a capacity like green infrastructure can help these things not happen as much anymore. Okay, so here's kind of an illustration of how the trees are helping. You know, you water trees at the root, the roots absorb a lot of water. That's how it's taking in most of its nutrients, right? But if you've ever gone up to a tree, even a small one, after a rainfall and you shake it, you would be shocked at how much tree is going to fall off, or how much water is going to fall off of that tree. If you come out to a planting with us in the rain, just give it a go, and you're going to see you'll be drenched head to toe. So between water that's getting trapped up in the canopy and everything that's getting absorbed at the roots, we're keeping a lot of water out of those drains that otherwise would hang out in the sewage with your own and out into the waterways. All right, so here's kind of here's the 10,000 trees initiative that we're working on right now. Depending on the tree species, a mature tree in Indianapolis is going to get anywhere from capture 50 to 100 gallons of stormwater. As a result of our contract with citizens to plant these 10,000 trees, Alejandro and I only plant large growing trees. So by the time these trees are reaching maturity, we're getting much closer to everything being on that 100-gallon side of things. 50 could be some smaller and medium growing trees that we do still plant for the city all over the place. But since our projects are specifically targeted at keeping water out of at the storm drain, we're hoping to catch those higher numbers down the road as these trees start to reach maturity and get bigger. All right, I'm actually going to turn things over to our arborist, Hillary, and he's going to talk to you about some more benefits that our trees provide.
All right, sorry, I've got a couple different screens going on here, so if I'm like looking from side to side, don't be alarmed. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the greenhouse gas reduction. Again, Aaron mentioned that these numbers are in no particular order of their importance. We're just kind of going through bullet points here. So in 1 year, an acre of mature trees can absorb the amount of carbon dioxide produced when you drive your car 26,000 miles. So I think in these COVID times, folks are certainly driving a little bit less, as you know, nobody drove here tonight. So we're already cutting back a little bit on our greenhouse gas there. But yeah, a mature tree is, as you can see in this picture, huge. So a lot of the trees that we're planting don't always reach that maturity, but it's just good to kind of know a little gauge of how much we can get from that. I'm gonna click on to the next one. All right, air quality improvement. So one tree can absorb 120 to 240 pounds of pollution each year. So some examples of that type of pollution are dust, dirt, and smoke, and drops of liquids. So that kind of leads on to our next one about human health. I personally have seasonal allergies where I'm just inhaling lots of dust and tree pollen and grass pollen and all kinds of stuff. So it's good to know that trees are helping us out in that, just kind of cleaning out some of the stuff that's naturally in our air, mostly through the leaves, but there's also ways that it can go through on the bark. So I'm just gonna leave this up here for you guys to read at your own leisure. The statistics, I don't wanna just like keep reading off the bullet points here for you. Probably click on to the next one. So another huge benefit of especially urban trees is how they can help us on our heating and cooling costs of our homes, offices, significant buildings, just simply from their shade. And that is particularly helpful in the summer when we're looking at cooling costs, but they also help out a little bit in the winter too, providing protection over houses from snow and ice and things like that. I just sealed all of my windows last night with some weather stripping. So that's, you know, all of that is helpful when we're talking about urban settings and trying to make our homes and spaces more comfortable and cozy, especially this time of year. Trees are kind of the hidden secret that not everyone is seeing when talking about, you don't really think about that when you're looking at your homes, but strategically placing them is also important. So just looking at what direction you're facing, high sun, low sun, things like that, definitely take into consideration before planting. And those are definitely things that you can also look at when you're purchasing a home or renting a home or finding a new space to live or rent for office space or something like that. So and click on to the next one here about this kind of lines up a little bit more with what we do at KIB tree planting wise. So if you come out to any of our projects, or I should say when you come out to our projects, you'll notice that we do a lot of these street plantings where we're planting in the tree lawn, which is just, you know, the space between the street and the sidewalk. There's a little strip of grass often there, and that's where we plant trees a lot of times. So typically this is community-based engagement that we're planting in spaces where folks have already indicated that they want trees. And so that is a huge pro, but it also, from this picture, you can see just looks really beautiful, especially if you can incorporate some flowering trees or trees with different color. And providing shade for folks as they're commuting or walking or just enjoying time outside. It's really nice to have a little bit of shade and again, protection in the winter months also. We're gonna click on in the next slide here. This is just a quick, these slides are gonna be shared with you. So I would recommend anybody that is interested in kind of how you can figure out the little bit more specifics of benefits of trees. This is, if you just Google this, and this link is also on the slide. This is a really great measure for you to check out. If you have a huge oak tree in your yard and you want to know a little bit more specifically how it is beneficial to share with your friends and neighbors and stuff like that, this is a good tool for that.
Let me add to that real quick for the benefits. So as you can see on the top right-hand side, there is a picture of Indianapolis, and on the left is like a little legend. That's just an example of our tree plotter database, which is the software we use to track all of our tree metrics and tree information. It's actually open to the public. If you can go to our website, kibi.org, go to the Community Forestry page, and there's a link to that tree plotter database. It'll show you individual projects that we planted all across the city. There's thousands of them. And you can also filter that to see all the trees that we planted all across the city. In this picture, you see an example of just all the bur oaks that we planted all across the city as far back as 2006. So if you live on a specific block or work near there, or are just curious about KIB trees, you can just like zoom in on the map, see specific areas where we may have planted, look at specific species, see how long they've been there, and just get a little more informed about the trees surrounding you and your neighborhood. So that'll be, like Hillary said, that'll be on the link on this slide, so you can take a look at that later as well.
I'll also put that link in the chat here while we go on break. So thank you guys all for, making it through my really bad slide changes. It like won't click through sometimes, but other times it's very sensitive. So we're gonna take 10 minutes here and then return for the second half of our training tonight. I'm gonna probably answer some questions in the chat, but feel free to go do your business. See you in 10 minutes. Cool. All right, let's see if I can be better at presenting. All right. First up is the tree planting process. There have been several questions about this, so I'm going to learn all about it.
All right. So yeah, this is going to be an explanation of our tree planting process. It's everything, how the process goes, everything from how we get the money to the trees going in the ground to maintenance. And this period lasts over 3 years. We do maintenance on our trees for 3 years after we plant them, and it takes us a couple months to get the resources we need to get started on the planting process. So if you want to go ahead, Esmé. So first with the fundraising, this picture you can see here was a planting that we did with a group called International Paper. They are like a corporation that sells paper. And they came out, volunteered with us, and donated some money. And this is like one of the many ways that we get funds. We also have individual donations. We have large contracts, such as the Citizens Energy Group and the contracts with the city of Indianapolis. So these are all different ways that we get funds to continue with our planting efforts. This one goes into how we select our areas. So there's a couple different ways. The way we would prefer to get all of our tree plantings, if it was possible, we would essentially have the tree planting applications. They're available to the public. We have recently rolled them, switched them from being season by season to just a rolling application that we review, contact community partners, and then inform them, if we can approve the site, if we can't. And this often goes hand in hand with visiting the site, having one of our arborists check out whether it's the right place for the kind of trees we're planting, for the kind of trees that the community partners want. And we use a million different factors to kind of estimate this. Stuff between like utility guidelines, IPL gives us guidelines, Citizens Energy Group gives us guidelines about having trees near their infrastructure and facilities. The city of Indianapolis gives us guidelines. We follow best practice guidelines as established by the International Society of Arboriculture. And we try to get as much information as we can from other scientists in the field, from partners such as like IU down in Bloomington, and partnerships we've established with professors down there, and as much research as we can get to kind of establish best practices to get the right tree in the right place while still trying to meet contract numbers and community needs. There'll be a link to the tree planting application as well here in the slides when you get them. So once we get the applications in, we try to figure out where they are in the city, how they get split up to our different arborists, and where they're what contract they're gonna fit under, how we're gonna fund these things. Because while people apply for the trees, the people that are applying are not expected to pay for any of this stuff. This is the fundraising comes from other sources. Once this is done, then we have to determine the area that it's going to be in, determine the types of trees that are going to be going in that area, all these different things. And then we fill out what you see here, the flora permit. This is submitted to the city. Every single season we submit one for all of the plantings that we will do. It includes a whole bunch of information from location to street tree species. And the city's forestry department approves these for us. We have a pretty good working relationship with them. So by now, it's a pretty quick process, but it requires their trust in us and our trust in them for this to be a quick process. Then once these permits are on the way, a lot of these things are kind of happening at the same time. They're not happening as nice and neatly as these lists that's popping up. So our arborists go, and either if we have the time that year or if we have the resources, we go to the individual nurseries that we source from to pick the trees that we want to have planted that season. Our nurseries we try to be as local as possible. We have nurseries in Liston, Indiana. We have nurseries in just over the border in both Illinois and Ohio, but we do have to go as far as like Nashville and stuff sometimes to source some of our other trees, because when we're pulling 3,000 plus trees and a lot of them aren't like landscape trees or stuff like that, we do have to go a little further to source some of our species. And once again, that fits into the right place or right tree, right place guidelines that we follow. We try to get the healthiest, best trees into the best places possible. And then at this time, we're also doing our project scheduling, which is literally what we've been working on these last 2 weeks. We determine, once we have all these applications in and we've kind of found some other plantable spaces, we will begin to schedule out these plantings to see what's the when can we get tree tenders to come and do some of their training. Maybe in early March, a small planting would be great for that. When do corporate partners need and want to come and help us volunteer some of these tree plantings, and kind of fitting all of these puzzles together, all these pieces of the puzzle together to make a really good schedule for the season. And because of that, we do maintain very flexible schedules. You'll see us, as Jill and Jesse can attest, you'll see us scrambling just before planting sometimes, because we've had to readjust hundreds of trees in a relatively short amount of time. And it's really fun, but like Jill said, sometimes the hecticness of the work and the difficulty of it can make it appealing. All right, so here we talk about some of like how we pick some of the trees that we pick. So something really important to understand is that we plant only natives, and only and 50% of the trees that we plant are giving trees, as Aaron said earlier. So we define natives by saying it's trees that were in Indiana or surrounding states in pre-colonial times. So in the early to late 1700s, and the further west you go, the later that timeline goes. So as you can see on the left here, these are essentially like the native maps for some of these species. Like the hackberries extend pretty much across the entire continental US. American beech tends to stay more towards the East Coast and South, and northern pecans just take a relatively short area down from Texas into Indiana and Illinois. And pretty much every single species that we deal with will have we'll have a map that kind of resembles one of these three. And we are, like I said, we try to take as much research into our tree considerations as possible. As global warming occurs, some of these maps are shifting northeast or northwest. So these are considerations that we take into account every single season as we do our tree ordering. And then on the right, you see that little map, that's Indiana and surrounding states. If they're native to that area, we consider them natives, because while it would be really nice to be able to look at the landscape of Indianapolis and be like, oh yeah, some of these trees have been here since pre-colonial times, the geography has just changed so much that an urban landscape is not very similar to what a non-urban landscape is within the same geographic regions. If you want to go to the next slide, yeah, we'll talk about the differences between non-natives and natives. So essentially, non-native trees and invasive species they're often used interchangeably, but are not always so. So non-native species are essentially exactly what it is: species that aren't from these surrounding states and were not here before colonial times, but they have been imported into the area. Sometimes they can be species like the ginkgo, which are, you know, really pretty trees that are often planted, you know, in places. We have them all around downtown. They're often planted all around the city because they have really beautiful fall foliage, like those yellow ones you can see in the picture there. And ginkgos aren't invasive. They don't spread too widely in this region. They're relatively easy to control. So you will see them often used for all kinds of landscaping purposes. While they are beautiful trees, we try to shy away from them just to reestablish some of these native trees, because the native trees are usually the ones that are the best giving trees for our native flora and fauna. And then on the left, the Bradford pear and the tree of heaven are examples of non-native and invasive species. They are species that once they are introduced into a region, they tend to propagate like crazy unless heavily controlled. Unfortunately, both the Bradford pear and the tree of heaven have been heavily planted throughout pretty much the whole US. And while like the Callery pear can be really pretty because it flowers, you know, bright white and or pinkish flowers for a short period during the spring, they tend to, you know, go places that they shouldn't be. So we obviously stay away from species like that. And then to add to this, there's also some species that are native, but tend to, you know, spread like crazy as well. And, you know, we have a hard time controlling them, such as like the silver maple. You'll find silver maple all across the state, all across the city. While they are native trees and they're very pretty trees, we don't have to worry about planting them because they'll spread themselves very, very easily. So that's just like kind of an example into how we go about picking our tree species here. Sorry, somebody had their volume on around here. Yeah, so this actually answers one of the questions that was asked earlier. So throughout this process, we go ahead and we mark underground utilities for everything. We call 811. We have a pretty good process to make sure that everything has been checked beforehand. While you'll see plantings that there may be a gas line along a tree lawn, and we will still plant over it. It's because we've determined that the gas line is 5, 6 or more feet deeper than that. And, you know, we plant our trees up to maybe 2.5 feet depth. So it is completely fine to plant over some of these utility lines as long as we know well in advance what they are. And in my time here, we've never hit one or had any major issues with them. So I think we do pretty good as regard to that, but it is a very common concern. Yeah, so here is kind of the first step of when we start getting volunteer help and external help besides just our staff. Unloading and tree deliveries are kind of like the first step of that, where we get 3,000 plus trees a year. So those have to be delivered from the nurseries. We have to unload them into our tree yard where we store them before the planting happens. Often we have volunteers come help with that. Often it's tree tenders. And then we have to, like in the days leading up to the planting or the morning of the planting, we have to take these trees and set them down where they will be planted for their final resting spot before the rest of the volunteers get there. So then there again, we often use tree tenders or other volunteers for this. Next is the pruning. Yeah, so pruning, we try to prune all of our trees right when the planting, like the first thing we do in the morning, and that's something that tree tenders really help us with. So pruning, while it may sound very simple, requires a relatively easy process, but it has to be a process that is well followed, and people have to be educated on it to do it well, or else risk damaging the tree and stunting its growth for its entire lifetime. So we use tree pruners, like you can see in the picture there. We also use hand saws, and this pruning really helps us, like when the trees are really young like this, it really helps us kind of see how the tree's going to grow. So we lop off low branches so that when as a tree grows, we ensure that those branches aren't, extending too far out into the sidewalk, extending too far out into the street. And we continue to do these prunings annually for the first 3 years of the tree's planting, after the tree's planting. And then this should take us to the planting. Yeah, so the planting day is, the big days that I imagine you've all heard about. I imagine why you're all here. We have plantings of all kinds and all sizes. We do plantings like this last year. We had to do a lot of plantings where it was just a handful of staff, 4 or 5 of us going out and putting as many trees as possible into the ground, to big plantings. In previous years, we've had like events such as like the Lily Day of Service, where a bunch of Lily employees come out and we plant 1,000 trees in a day. That's not going to be happening in the near future, but we will have plantings, up to maybe 125, 150 volunteers here this year. Those plantings will be split up into smaller groups of 25 maximum, so we can, safely follow COVID restrictions and all that other stuff. And to go with that, we also give tree planting demos at every single one of these, either for people that are brand new to tree planting or people that just want refreshers. We try to cover this just so we can explain safety guidelines and explain proper techniques and why they're important. So Aaron there, I think, is showing off some of the tools. That's a shovel, pretty standard. And then the more dangerous of the tools that we have, a pickaxe, that we often have to use in many of the soils around Indy, because a lot of places around Indy have a lot of construction material in them, are heavily compacted, are bone dry in the late spring, early fall. So those holes are fun to dig, and I'm sure you will encounter them at some point in your tenure with us as a tree tender. All right, and then this part leads back to our database management. So we GPS every single tree that we plant. At the end of a planting, you will often see the project manager or one of the staff members walking around just staring at their phone, pulling little tags off of trees. And you're like, why aren't they planting trees? Well, I'm over here slaving away. It's because we're GPSing. We're submitting every single one of these trees into our database so we can track them from the day they get planted to the last, past their maintenance period with us. So we can see if they're alive. We can see how much water they've received. We can see, pretty much every stat that we want to see out of them. And once again, on the left-hand side, there is an image of our like a tree planting database. And this is a planting we did along Shadeland in Brookville on that overpass that got, just smashed with a whole lot of trees, which is really nice. That's 1,000 trees in a relatively, oh, and actually that goes back to my earlier example. That was actually done during the Lily Day of Service. All 1,003 trees were planted in a single day by Lily volunteers, which, just goes to show what the power of volunteers can do. And from here on, I will leave the maintenance part up to Hillary.
Alrighty, maintenance part is on me. Sorry, I was trying to read through some of these questions that you guys are having. So keep putting them in the question box and we'll make sure we get through all of them. So I think we briefly touched on our youth tree team program. That's generally high school or college age kids that we hire. It's a paid job for them to mulch and water our trees. So that's some of these pictures that you're seeing. They mulch and water our trees for 3 years as part of our maintenance contract. We do the old fashioned watering with 5-gallon buckets. So each tree gets 2 buckets and Esmé can, watering. So yeah, that's a picture of either one of our staff members or youth tree team just watering some of our trees. We did a little bit of that in COVID times because we had some really dry times. So that might be something that we ask volunteers to do. Typically a paid staff member thing because it's pretty labor intensive. But sometimes we will water the trees in the day of planting. And Yeah. Also, we have watering contractors that if our youth can't get to everything and we have dangerous streets where there's lots of traffic or things like that, we have contractors that can get out there safely and do it. Mulching. Mulching is super important for trees. We will mulch the trees the day of the planting, so you will learn how to do that. I'll just have Esmé click over to the next slide so you can see the do's and don'ts of mulching. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the don't, and on the right-hand side, you'll see the do. Hopefully you guys can tell the difference between what's good and what's bad just from this really great infographic that Cy put together for us. And now hopefully you'll notice when you're going into neighborhoods, you'll see, hopefully you'll see more of the do's, but my guess would be that you'll see quite a few of these don'ts. We call this volcano mulching. It's super bad for the trees for a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons, just directly tied back to the watering, it doesn't allow for water to get to the main order root or the root flare, that tiny little bit of an angle that you can kind of see on that graphic. We'll get into that a little bit more as we learn how to plant trees like in real time, in real life. You'll see what that looks like. So this little pocket basically of soil and mulch creates a nice little pool for the water to sit and slowly percolate down through the more fibrous roots, which are the nutrient gatherers for the tree at especially the first 3 years of the tree's life. Another reason that volcano mulching is bad is that it can cause lots of decay and damage to the trunk. As you can see, all that mulch is just like choked up right there on the trunk of the tree. And that provides a really great spot for unwanted insects or potential fungus and all kinds of really nasty stuff to a tree at a really vulnerable point in its life. When a tree's young, it's really fighting, and there's lots of things against it already in an urban setting. You know, you have lots of foot traffic, you've got lots of carbon, cars, all kinds of things, lawnmowers. There's all kinds of things that are extra stressful for trees. So whatever we can do to try to protect them. And mulching is one thing that we are really adamant about here at KIB, just trying to teach people the right way to do this, because this is something that everybody mostly does at their home. Generally, people do lots of mulching or they hire somebody to do it. So just making sure you know the correct way to do it and why it's good for the tree. You want to click over the next slide. I think there's some better pictures of some of that trunk damage I was talking about. Yeah, as you can see, it's just like right up here on the trunk of the tree, and you can't see that main order root or that little like flare that should be there. That flare is really important for the tree as it's in its younger years establishing its taper or its balance. And if it's not exposed to oxygen, it will not thrive. And we want that to thrive so that the tree will thrive. So super important to have all of that bark exposed. And so we just can't have all of that mulch right up around there. You want to click on to the next one. I think there's some better examples of what's going on underneath. As you can see, there's about an inch or so of chunked up mulch on that. And that root flare was not exposed. So we can't see the top of the tree, but I could guess that it is experiencing a lot of stress because it wasn't growing properly or most beneficial to the tree. Another thing that you'll notice is the discoloration of the bark. So below the mulch, it's a lot darker. There's moisture that's been trapped in there, which is a great place for, again, insects or fungus to get in there and start decaying the bark, causing damage. And when you have decay down there so low at the base of the bark, it's gonna cause it to fail in some way. Maybe not immediately, but at some point that's a really like weak point for a tree. And so if it's all rotted out down at their bottom, it's just gonna like flop over and maybe fall on a house or a human or something dangerous. So those are things that we are really trying to avoid. We'll click on to the next slide here. I think it has a little bit more that's just another picture of the mound. We don't want the mound, we want the donut. So so this is a little bit more pictures of some decay going on along the trunk. On the left here, you'll see what we call a girdling root. It's basically a root that is growing in a circle around the trunk of the tree. And essentially what that's going to do is just like choke the tree out and cause it a lot of problems in its future. I have worked for a major tree company, and one of the things that we did a lot was go into more established trees that were several years old and excavate the root flare because it was planted too deep, likely. And we would pull out all of the soil with an air compressor and try to expose this. So from what I can see on this picture, it looks like that's what happened. Somebody went through with an air compressor and blasted all of the soil out with air as opposed to with a shovel, as to not damage the roots. And then what you do here to try to help save the tree is just remove little chunks of that girdling root. And it's extremely expensive. It's extremely dangerous to the tree. And it's essentially like the last resort to try to save the tree and help it thrive. You can tell that this is happening on the canopy of the tree. You'll start to notice some decline. And oftentimes that's an indicator that there was something going on below the surface that you can't see, causing more damage up top. So at KIB, we want to avoid that. We want to save people money, time. We want to save the tree future problems. So proper planting of the tree, making sure that root flare is up at the top. You'll be able to see if a girdling root has started to do that formation and be able to eliminate it above the surface as opposed to below the surface. These are all things that we do in the root prep of the tree before we put it in the ground. So that's something that you'll learn a little bit more about when you come out to a day of tree planting, but just kind of gives you a good idea of what you would be looking for in a girdling root, why they're dangerous, why we're trying to avoid them for the tree. And yeah, I'll kick it off to Aaron. He's going to talk a little bit more about some of the other maintenance stuff that we do on trees.
All right, so some of the maintenance things that we do aren't always done through the tree tender program. That said, I have certainly seen both Jill and Jesse don the hard hat to start staking trees the day of a project. So it is something that you will be trained in once you're out in the field with us. But, we're planting so many trees at a time that, we can't be out there every day ensuring that they're growing straight. So typically a day of planting, depending on how much of that root prep work we have to do on a tree that Hillary was just talking about. Sometimes you might be taking off over half of the root ball, which is totally fine. We want that root system to be as healthy as possible. But that also means once you get it into that hole that we spent time digging, chances are that tree is going to start leaning, and we don't want it to start growing at like a 45 degree angle or anything intense like that. So we do practice what we consider to be proper staking techniques. And this just kind of ensures that the tree stays in place and it is encouraged to grow straight and develop its roots as it kind of takes hold and begins its growth. So here we have a few different techniques that you might see out in the public. So here on the left side, more or less, it kind of looks like these have been staked too long. For us, we never keep things on longer than 3 years. If we can help it and we get to it, we like that to be 2, just because some of our species grow so much faster than others. Things like elms and sycamores and tulips tend to grow so fast that the trunks can just get so wide that they'll outgrow the staking system that we use on these trees. So what you're seeing here are not practices that we use. This other, this 3-stake approach, I do see in some larger cities. I've got a brother that lives overseas, and some of the parks that are around him, this is kind of a method I see there a little bit more often. Canopy cover where he's at is not quite as intense, so I'm just assuming that people running maintenance on those are a little bit more hands-on on a daily basis with them. So this kind of like 3-stake approach with the bands is a good one. We don't particularly have the capacity to go out as often as some of these municipalities would to take them off in real time. So Esmé, if you can move to the next slide, I will show you the system that we use. We just kind of use a large steel stake. And these plastic bits here, those are called trematos. And just kind of like fix that around the trunk of the tree and use that rubber band is what's actually going to hold the tree in place within that system. So there's enough kind of leeway with that band that if there's a wind blowing through, the tree does have some sway. We do want it to move back and forth. If it's too stiff, a strong wind can come through and just snap the tree in half. And on most important part of this process, and I can speak to this because I busted my head open with both a stake and a post pounder as proper PPE. As we're staking in real time, you will see some youth tree team members here donning hard hats and ear protection. It's a lot louder than you might think it is, and they've got person holding that post pounder's got gloves on, make sure it doesn't slip out of their hands. But effectively, this is a great system we use because outside of the rubber bands that do kind of disintegrate after a few years, it's totally reusable. So as we're coming back to these sites 3 years after the fact, we're able to pop these trematos off, put them in a bin, reuse them at the next planting we need them for. Same are true of these stakes, unless they get caught on a root and kind of get like bent, we're going to be able to use them again. And if we can't use those stakes again, we do take them to OmniSource and they recycle them for us. But I don't know, I would guess maybe 20% of our trees get staked more often than not. The planting process itself is totally fine, but we do use it in the event that trees do need staked. Okay, so here's some common issues that we face. This is mostly true for planting in parks specifically. The #1 killer of our trees are lawnmowers and string trimmers. No offense to the parks people or who they hire to mow, but a lot of these folks are contractors, so they have a lot of sites to go to, so they're trying to get through specific areas as quickly as possible. You can't fault them for that, but that also means that sometimes they get a little bit too close to our trees for comfort. So anytime we're planting in high traffic areas like that, we use trunk guards. So anytime you've seen a planting of us, you probably notice these white tubes on the bottom of the tree. I know they don't look aesthetically pleasing, but it does encourage people to stay away from the base of that tree and just kind of ensure that those trees can get established and large enough that it does come in contact with a string trimmer down the road. It's going to be a lot better off than if you hit it in that first year that it's trying to get established. Again, here's some more examples of what can happen. So these actually looks like it might not be a mower or string trimmer. Some of the more wild parks that we planted in, Eagle Creek comes to mind. We've planted along tree lines and kind of like down by the reservoir there. And we've had to put some beaver and deer cages on a tree. So that could mean a large, wider sort of cage to keep deer out. If we're dealing with beavers or other kind of like pests like that, we'll typically make the cage a little bit more closer to the tree and then put a larger trunk guard on it. So it just kind of gets that extra protection from something biting through it and trying to use it as its own habitat. While we did talk about giving trees and the importance they provide for wilderness habitat, we don't want something to chop it down to use it for its beaver dam or something like that. But so there's just kind of some common and uncommon problems we see in terms of trunk damage and what we try to do to alleviate that. And if you want to click over there, here's our this is what we see most often is these kind of like high mow areas that we're planting in. And an example of why we put these trunk guards in there. If weed whacker hits a trunk guard, it might crack a little bit, but more often than not, it's fine, and that trunk's not going to be damaged. I think I'm good there. Oh, here we go. And here's why we put deer cages on at places like Eagle Creek where you see a lot more wildlife. I don't think we have many projects or trees at like Fort Harrison, but I know I've taken some cages off there in the past. But yeah, they're just kind of like rubbing their antlers up against the tree, and we don't want that to happen either. Again, here's another example of a staking system that was kept on too long. You can kind of see how like the wire on this cut into the actual trunk of the tree. And here is a properly staked tree. We'll go ahead and give Jesse Beck credit for this one. He probably did it. But you see it had been leaning before, standing up straight and tall. You can see, if you zoom in close enough, you can see the band in there. So it's gonna have enough space to move around in a strong wind. Give it just enough kind of wiggle room so it doesn't snap also. You can see the excellent mulch job there. You've got the bowl, it's not volcano mulched. Trunk guard is in place. It is in a right of way, so you know you want to keep the mowers away from that as well. And with that, Esmé, I believe we are kicking things back over to you.
Yeah, we're gonna touch back with me real quick. And here's another common problem that you'll see, not with KIB trees, but with other people's trees, is planting too big of trees in too small of spaces. On the right here, you see very large growing trees. Don't ask me what kind, they're trees to me. They're not pine trees. But they're definitely in too small of a space. They are way too big for that thin right of way. But on the left, you actually do see an appropriately sized tree in a larger boulevard or right of way. So that's what it should look like. And because KIB does visit all of its sites and reviews its plantable space, it makes sure that all trees are planted in the correct amount of space. We always make sure we're pairing small growing trees with small spaces and larger trees with larger ones. We also follow the city guidelines about 6 feet of space for a big tree. And I believe it's 4 feet for a smaller tree. I'm seeing nods. All right. So we also follow the city on that. So it's not just like internal decision about what size goes where. We also follow along larger guidelines. We also see commonly something very upsetting. It's called chlorosis. It's a type of nutrient deficiency. And it is a abnormally yellowed leaf that comes from a lack of chlorophyll. And chlorophyll, if you remember from high school biology, it's what makes your leaves green in all plants. Chlorophyll is necessary for them to thrive and do well and grow. And so when you don't have access to that, it can really harm your tree, stunt its growth, and end up killing it. And chlorosis is caused by a number of issues. One of them is poor drainage in the soil. So you just have a whole bathtub of water sitting there. It's not great, basically drowns your tree. It can also be caused by damaged roots or roots that have been really squished together, are also not great. Any kind of nutrient deficiencies in the soil or a high soil pH. And one thing to note is high soil pH can prevent roots from taking in nutrients, even if the nutrients are there. So if you're thinking about planting a tree at home, it's always a good idea to get a soil test around every 3 to 5 years or so, just to make sure that you're not planting a tree in some place that it won't thrive. A sign of chlorosis is it's darker veins in the middle of the leaves with the very light lime green surrounding it. That's not the same as a naturally light green leaf. Those are naturally that way. This is clearly a tree that has turned lighter than it should be. But luckily, this is all prevented by proper tree planting and nutrient access. So making sure you're planting in a spot that has enough of the major nutrients and making sure that you're preparing the roots properly and not damaging them when you plant the tree. And here's a really good graphic about soil compaction and like root compaction. So roots find like air pockets in soil to grow through. And when you have ground that's really high clay content, so really dense, muddy, you probably could make like a plate out of it or a bowl. That's going to be really hard for the roots to find a air pocket to grow into. So on the left, you see roots that have had to stay towards the surface because they literally cannot get deeper. They cannot find a way there. That makes it the tree more unstable, more likely to tip over, less likely to get to deeper water tables, less likely to get to deep pockets of nutrients, all sorts of bad stuff there. On the right is an excellent example of what roots should look like. They're really deep, really holding that plant in place or that tree in place, really being able to access all sorts of things that they need throughout the soil. So this is something that might be more important for you to consider when you're planting a tree at home. Check and see, is my soil something that is like absolute clay? And if it is, you can amend your soil with a lot of compost and things like that and kind of help it get to a better shape so you can plant more stuff there more successfully. And with that, I'm turning it back on over to Alejandro briefly.
Yeah, hi again, everybody. Yeah, so pretty much everything we've covered up until now is just basic information about how you'll be participating in tree tenders, how essentially we plant our trees and why we follow specific processes. And this is all information that you will need to, be good at the tree plantings and information you'll use in our future physical plantings when, out in the field. But also it's information that people ask you about, you guys will become citizen tree experts. You'll see when you participate in tree plantings with us, you'll see neighbors maybe come up to you and ask some of these questions. Whenever you tell people that you're a tree tender and are working on the certification, stuff like that, people will automatically, assume, and rightly so, that you are better informed than the general public. We do have, there's obviously a bunch more science behind some of the hows and whys of this, and we are actually working on building a presentation around that for tree tenders in the future. But that leads me into what an arborist is and the difference between, an arborist and a certified arborist. So arborists are people that, professionals that work in the field of trees that, deal with arboriculture in general. Whereas certified arborists are people that have gone through certification process with the International Society of Arboriculture and are not only, able and knowledgeable about doing a lot of this tree work, but also have the right insurance, the right safety, the right safety protocols and all this stuff to do the proper tree work. Whenever you see, like if people come and ask you about like, yeah, I have this giant tree in my yard and it needs some pruning. And you're like, yeah, well, I know a little bit about pruning. And, people start compounding these bigger questions on you. This is where the distinction needs to be made. You like an ISA certified arborist will have tree climbing guidelines, chainsaw use safety protocol guidelines, and a bunch of these other things. It's important for the public to know the difference between, an arborist and a certified arborist. So while you may receive some of these questions that go, past your comfort level, past your knowledge level, this is where that distinction lies. And it does make, a big difference, not only for your safety and other people's safety, but also for the tree's health, because there is, a lot more information in depth here. And if you want to click the next slide, the ISA is just essentially like a giant or, body of all sorts of arboriculture knowledge and arboriculture credentials. There's all different types of arborists. So if people ever have questions about, doing larger tree work, or if you ever have questions about doing larger tree work, the ISA's website provides a really good tool to find people that are available to do this work around the city, the county, the state, the whole world. So, verifying people's credentials and stuff like this is very important when you're talking about dangerous work such as tree climbing, limbing up and pruning larger trees. And just very important for you to know when you are, approached by friends, family, members of the public. And from here on, I'll turn it back to Esmé, and we have.
I'll just add to that. I think a certified arborist is someone who would never tell you or never do volcano mulching versus just, a regular arborist who maybe works for a landscaping company. They might just dump the mulch and make it into a volcano and go. And that's a really good rule of thumb. Like if you see someone who says they're an arborist and they volcano mulch, take a step back and wonder, okay, that's concerning. So this is the first part of the training in becoming a tree tender. The next two parts are doing your field trainings of planting and pruning. We have combined those two so they are happening at the same project. We have 3 separate days when those can happen. That's March 2nd, 4th, and 9th. And there'll be 25 spots at each of these projects. You'll be split into small groups, probably about 5, paired with a CF member or another member of our native landscapes who are also certified ISA arborists. You'll be outdoors wearing a mask, socially distanced. There's gonna be tons of hand sanitizer available at every single project this spring. So it's gonna be a pretty safe setup. But that one of those 3 days is what you wanna attend. You don't need to attend all 3, just one. Happening also in early March, there is a big tree planting scheduled for March 6th. Alejandro and his team just finalized the exact locations for these. So I'm gonna be putting those on the calendar tomorrow morning. So currently everything says TBD, but that will be ironed out tomorrow by like 10:30 a.m. And I'll just say that big tree planting on March 6th, it's gonna be the first regular-ish tree planting since COVID, which is kind of a big deal. A lot changed last year. I'm very excited for it to be like semi-normal. Again, there'll be small breakout groups, even though overall the site will have many people. You'll all be in very separate groups so you won't be overlapping. And if this training also got you wondering about how to get trees in your neighborhood where you live, there is a Got Trees virtual tree application workshop happening on February 11th that kind of walks you through how to successfully apply for trees in your plantable space in your neighborhood. So just wanted to plug that. Okay, next up, here's how to find projects. This is an extremely important part of this training. You all know where to find the KIB regular calendar. Obviously, you all made your way to this training. However, there is a special filter for just tree tender projects. We reserve a certain number of spots for you guys. And as you can see in this screen cap here, there's a pick list, a drop-down list here on the calendar. You want to go to tree tenders, click that, and then search events, click that button. That will populate all of your special tree tender only projects. It'll say tree tenders only and then the project name. That's where you can find those. If you have troubles getting to that calendar, I am happy to work with you. Sometimes, the calendar breaks down and I have to fix it. Let me know if there are issues with that. Technology makes your life so much easier. But just know that is a primary way for you to find what projects are happening and when. There's also a Facebook group on Facebook, obviously. It's just KIB Tree Tenders. If you want to be added to that, go ahead and ask to be added. If your Facebook name is something other than your name, I might, shoot you a question, but please do join that. We love to have community made on that. So if you want to post some stuff that you saw about trees, share a picture you took at a planting, feel free to do that. We love to see you guys getting involved with each other, making friendships. There's also a newsletter. It's currently once a month on the 4th Tuesday of every single month. That gives you an update about what's happening, invitations to certain projects, highlight something that's happening, or just ramble about how great the environment is in some way. Kind of depends month to month, but stay tuned for that. You guys will start receiving those in February. So there's that. And here's a screen cap. This is the Get the Dirt newsletter. A lot of you have probably came
to this training from that newsletter. This is the general, very KIB wide. It covers a lot of material. The one that I write is very targeted to trees and what your program does. So it's much more specific to the tree tender and community forestry programs. But yeah, read them. They oftentimes contain really interesting information and ways to get involved. Yeah, so here, I'm not going to read this all for you guys, but this is just an idea of the kinds of perks that you get the more you volunteer. So being a tree tender, you choose how often you want to volunteer, whatever works for your schedule, whatever works for whatever you got going in your life right now. But the more you volunteer, the more stuff I'll get you. So you can earn things that range from an arbor saw to get you a tree. You might get tool cleaners or leather gloves that are embossed with the KIB logo. So there's all sorts of items that you can use as bribes to get where you need to go. So I'll connect with you whenever you've earned a perk and get it into your hands. Okay, so that ends my portion as well as the whole very long PowerPoint. We're now going to take some time to do some questions. Thank you guys for bearing with us, especially my poor slide transition skills.